Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined here by Jason Richards, the CEO of Daxbot, for a very exciting interview. Jason, thanks for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Really excited to talk about what you guys are doing in this space. Let's start by just learning a little bit more about what you're doing. You have said, and you kind of have the opinion, right, that you are just scratching the surface of what robots can do in everyday life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you look back and robots are not, it's not like a novel concept. We've had robots on factory floors for decades. And, some of our mechanical engineers have been using, robots in spaces in manufacturing for decades, like I said. And so now, as there's more and more connectivity that's out, more broadly, and artificial intelligence and computer learning and all the different things have kind of come to this space where we're at now, where you can start seeing robots that are going to be out in public spaces. And so it's really interesting to see that as different robotic platforms are starting to emerge onto the scene, that it's going to start being able to pick up some slack where humans traditionally have done a lot of these jobs, and now there's a lot more demand for labor that people aren't able to fulfill. And so being able to have robots fill those spaces, it's a really unique time. And so I see over the next 5 to 10 years that really becoming a whole new industry that people haven't even really been aware of in the last 5 years.
Got it. That makes sense. And you've kind of touched on this already, but let's dig into this part of it a little bit more because, as you've said, this is a key component, the human acceptance of the robots. How important is this, and what are maybe some of the roadblocks to gaining that human acceptance of the robots?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people have to wrestle with. It's interesting that even just December of last year, 2021, that Toronto just made robots illegal on the streets, and the reason for that is that there was a company that was doing some cool things, and they had some little robots running around. Problematic though, because they were more annoying to people. It's kind of the same issue when electric scooters, are getting banned in cities. They're really neat, but people have to want them before they're going to be accepted. Same with drones, actually. I think that's probably the closest comparison. Is that drone technology is really neat, and it can be doing a lot of really cool things for us that we haven't really seen yet. And the reason I think that it hasn't done as much as it could is because of the human acceptance piece. It became something that people didn't want, weren't necessarily ready for, having drones flying all over the sky. And so it's become a bit of an inhibitor. And so in the same way, when people think of robots, if you think of, movies from the 1980s, you think of like Terminator and places like, things like that, where robots can be potentially scary. And so when we're thinking about, we're going to have robots leave the factory floor and now come to a pedestrian space that is usually reserved for humans and for maybe pets, how do we integrate into that system? And so there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, but the thing that we've looked at is having the human acceptance piece being paramount. And so a few of the things that we've done in that space, when we were in initial development, we went to the Oregon School of the Blind and we said, how would you like to perceive, things on the sidewalk that you're going to be sharing, and people that are handicapped in wheelchairs, how do you want to interact with these devices? So there are kind of two extremes in robotics. You have one extreme that it's something that's very, very useful. So factory floors, for example, it can go and weld cars on a manufacturing line. And then you have robots that, if people were watching the CES conference in Vegas this year, there's a lot of really neat robots that are out there, like Sophia, for example. People might be familiar with Sophia if they understand robotics. And she became a citizen of Saudi Arabia. Really neat artificial intelligence, and almost looks like a human. And that's a whole different topic. But because it has more emotions and things like that, you have two ends of the spectrum. One where it's very helpful. One that it's kind of neat because it looks more like a human, but not something that's actually helpful, that is actually accepted in human spaces. So a lot of the development that we did with Daxbot initially was how do we gain that acceptance first, and then what jobs could be done by these robots.
Got it. That makes sense. And then to maybe put a little bit more of a finer point on this, understand exactly where the potential is and what we can do next with this. Would you say that Dax has become the standard for robots accepted in human spaces? And again, maybe what are some of the hurdles you're looking to achieve in 2022 as we move forward? What are the next milestones and goals you guys are going to be looking to achieve?
Yeah, it's a great question. When with the human acceptance piece specifically, a lot of the things that have gone into research and development are great, but the actual power is coming from the legislation, and the advocacy that we've done in that space. For example, I mentioned Toronto. San Francisco did something similar in 2017. There's a lot of laws that are being passed in different states or even in just different cities that have to do with robots. When we say on the streets, it's actually on the sidewalks. So the issue has become that people don't really have a frame of reference for where these robots should exist. Should they be on the street? Well, that would be more of like a car, right? Like a self-driving vehicle. But on the sidewalks, that's a pedestrian space. And so helping lawmakers understand what the differences are, because a lot of the laws have actually essentially said, okay, we're going to let the Department of Motor Vehicles handle this, and all of these robots are essentially going to be mini cars on the sidewalk. Well, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. We don't like bicycles on our sidewalks. We don't really like scooters on our sidewalks. Well, the things that we are okay with as the general population are pets and people. And so being able to say, okay, we need to think of that first. So when we built Dax, it was around that, again, being very functional and very accepted in a human space. And so because we have both of those things, yeah, we are scratching the surface in the things that we can do, but we have to have human acceptance first. So for that reason, we like to think of ourselves as the gold standard. That there are other delivery robot companies out there that are doing things. Most of them look like miniature cars. But because we said, okay, we want the human acceptance piece to be paramount, a lot of the legislation that we've helped, be a part of in discussions, and said, this is a different way to think about it. You need to have the acceptance piece so that it will be widely adopted. And Dax is uniquely positioned in that space. So we are uniquely positioned that it will be highly accepted. The youngest person that loves Dax, I have a 2-year-old, and he is Dax's biggest fan. And the oldest person that I know of that has met Dax was a 94-year-old woman in a retirement community, and she loved Dax as well. So once you have that acceptance, and then you can get out there and do the jobs that robots are meant to do. And so some of the jobs, initially food delivery is one. The food delivery market itself is growing by leaps and bounds. Even before COVID hit, they were already projecting that the food delivery market was going to grow by about 600%. Now, obviously, COVID has I think, increased that rate a little bit. So if food delivery is going to grow, and then right now we have this unique labor shortage where people aren't showing up to work. I was at a pizza restaurant yesterday afternoon picking up pizza, and it's a large nationally known franchise, and there was one person working, and I looked at him and said, "Are you flying solo today?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "My manager didn't come in, and my coworkers weren't supposed to be here, and I wasn't supposed to be here until 5 hours from now," and it blew me away. And so across the country, people are feeling this, and so people are asking, "Are robots gonna take jobs?" And to that, I usually tell people that no, I think it's going to be a force multiplier. If we can have robots that are able to do the jobs that don't necessarily need human interaction, like food delivery, you can have a device that's able to do that job for you. There's other things that are going to come up. Eventually, I think I can see robots, washing people's windows or washing a car or walking the dog. There's a lot of tasks like that we can have robots do. And so being the gold standard in that space of both functional and personable is a pretty big deal.
That's great. Well, certainly looking forward to watching all of this unfold. I know you and Joseph Sullivan, the founder, and the rest of the team over at Daxbot have an amazing story thus far. Can't wait to see what you guys do next. Jason Richards, CEO, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you.